Welcome
to the Age of Awakening.
Please identify yourself. Enter.
Hey, what's up, Triple P Nation? Welcome back to the Triple P Life Podcast, where we're going to explore the tools, tactics, and strategies to help you achieve personal and business mastery. And this week, it's all about business mastery. Well, a little bit of health and wellness, but mostly business strategy. I've got an incredible guest this week. His name is Roger Gerard, Dr. Roger Gerard, excuse me. And we have just had an incredible conversation. He's the author of the book called Owning the Room, Leading with the Mind, Heart, and Spirit to Make Extraordinary Choices in a Demanding World and Lead with Purpose. Reignite passion, engagement for professionals in crisis. Well, of course I had to have him on. He talked about purpose and passion. So we're kind of symbiotic there, and it did not disappoint. If you're an entrepreneur, and by the way, you don't need to just listen to this if you're an entrepreneur. If you're in any organization, in fact, your home, right? You're going to learn so much about leadership, about the culture you build, how to transform a culture. Roger's just a wealth of knowledge. He has years and years of experience teaching and studying and learning. He's written multiple books. Another book he wrote is called On the Mend, which is he co-authored, and it's about revolutionizing healthcare to save lives and transform the industry, which we get into as well here too. You're going to love this conversation. You're going to learn a lot, so make sure you take some notes. But before we get to our interview, of course, it would not be a normal episode if we don't talk about this week's Success Snacks, and it's all about avoiding burnout. So let me ask you this question. How many of you are experiencing some burnout, right? I mean, look at all the crap that's going on in the world here. It's so almost impossible to filter out all the distractions, the noise, the stress, the conflict, all of it that's going on around us. So if you don't take time to set time aside to insulate your mind, to eliminate the distractions, I'm telling you, this is at the basis of so much of the anxiety and depression that people are experiencing. Here's my suggestion. Go walk in nature. Get outside. Turn off your phone. No podcast. If you're outside, turn me off. Just be with nature. Feel the sun on your face. Feel the ground underneath your feet. And if you can, take your shoes off and feel the vibration of the energy of the earth. Take a deep breath in. Let it fill your lungs fully. Exhale out slowly. Do that 7 to 8 times in a row. And then listen. Listen to the environment around you. Let it speak to you. Let it sing to you. The way you avoid burnout is by taking care of you, but doing it intentionally. Getting outside is a great resource to do so. Of course, I talk about meditation, the importance of meditation, of quieting your mind, of preparing your mind for success each day, for being intentional in your activities, being intentional in your thoughts, being intentional with your behaviors. The more that you invest in you, the better you are. So invest in you as much as you can, and I promise you will avoid burnout. Now, before we get to our interview, if you guys haven't done so recently, please go to your favorite podcast app and give us a rating and review. 5-star if so. Hit your like and follow button. Share with friends. As I always say, great content should flow through you, not to you. So if you find this episode one that really moves you, that excites you, then share it with somebody you know who can benefit. Because all we can do in this world is add value and to serve other people. And the way we do that is by sharing great content. And of course, giving them our energy and our love and our support. So if you can do that for me, that would be fantastic. Also, if you haven't, go check us out on YouTube. We're on YouTube now, getting great feedback there. Love to hear your comments. Dr. J at Triple P Life, or of course, Dr. J LaGuardia on any of the social media platforms. Go on there, give us your thoughts. It's another place where we can share our content. So without further ado, guys, let me bring on Dr. Roger Gerard. Enjoy the episode. Got a really special guest, Dr. Roger Gerard. Roger is a Scotty. I just found that out. And I was really drawn to have Roger on the show because of the book he wrote, one of the books he wrote, is called Owning the Room, Leading with Mind, Heart, and Spirit to Make Extraordinary Choices in a Demanding World and Lead with Purpose. Reignite passion and engagement for professionals in crisis. Well, as you all know, I've been a professional entrepreneur my entire life, and I love learning about leadership. I love learning about building businesses and processes and inspiring people with a vision, so on and so forth. And perhaps some of the presumptions I've had about how to do that effectively may have been a little off. And I think Roger's going to give us some insight to that. And so I'm really excited to have you on the show. Roger, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for letting me be here, Jay. I appreciate the time and the attention on this. So,
absolutely. So
where do we
why
start?
Don't we just start? Well, let's just start with the book. When did you decide to write it, and what inspired you to write it?
The book Owning the Room was inspired by 30 years of leading seminars and learning processes for executives and managers in a variety of organizations, mostly healthcare, but also including some manufacturing, some association work. But I was spending my time helping executives learn how to be outstanding leaders. And the title "Owning the Room" actually came from a CEO in Canada who had an executive who was struggling with finding a way to deal with intimidating staff who thought they were in charge. And over dinner one evening in my consult, he pointed at this executive and said to her, "You don't own the room. And if you don't own the room, they will not follow you." That was a trigger for me to say, there are a lot of people in leadership today who don't own the room. They don't understand that you can't be a leader if you don't have people who are willing to follow you. And that means displaying confidence. That means displaying care. That means knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it. That also means offering the people you're working for the same kind of loyalty that you expect from them. So those were the first premises that took me to Owning the Room. As I was doing that research, I encountered a lot of executives and managers who basically told me they weren't very happy people. And as I tried to figure out why they were feeling that way and not experiencing leadership in the way they had anticipated before they took the job, I began to understand that leaders in our society are being marginalized. Professionals are being marginalized. They're not being treated for the value that they bring. And that's an atrocity. It is difficult today to hire a teacher. They're not out there. We have fewer teachers today in our society than we had 5 years ago. It's difficult to hire somebody in law enforcement today. They're not feeling valued. It is difficult to hire nurses today. There are open nursing positions all over this country that are not being filled by nurses. And so healthcare organizations are trying to figure out workaround ways to provide the patient care services they need to provide without having the high level nursing care that we're accustomed to. The same thing is happening to physicians. Try to find a psychiatrist today, and it's difficult in just about any community. Many physician specialties are going wanting for participants because the docs are not feeling valued. What a lot of the organizations hiring these professionals are trying to do is they're trying to throw money at it. That'll never work. It's not about the money. It's about people feeling valued. Money is just a proxy for that.
I would
Those
agree with that.
Experiences generated in me a desire to write. I decided if this is what I'm seeing, somebody ought to hear this.
So let me ask you, why have leaders become marginalized? What's at the root cause there? And as we identify what the root cause is, or causes, could be many, in your view, how do we shift that around where we can begin to empower leaders again or empower people to step up to be better leaders, in your view?
Yeah, boy, you're right. It's many root causes. It's not just one. But to get at the heart of this, the first thing I want to do is take out of the lexicon the word empower. I'd rather take off the chains. We uh, spend years training our professionals in society, whether you're talking about a police force, a fire department, an ambulance rescue crew, physicians, nurses. We're spending years preparing these people. And then we bring them into an environment where everything is standardized, protocol, and we're telling them you must behave according to these standards and protocol. Well, when you're being taught to be a professional, you're being taught to use judgment. You're giving a great deal of knowledge, you're giving a great deal of responsibility, and you're taught to be able to use judgment given the reality that not every situation is like every other situation. And when you're brought into an environment where you're told to teach from this script or only practice nursing in this way, and you may not use judgment because if you use your judgment and do something differently, we may have to discipline you and you might get sued. That creates an environment where all of this professional training is now constrained. That is not treating professionals as if they're valued. Why are we doing all this training if we're going to confine people to scripts? So that to
So
me is at the heart of the problem.
can the argument made, just as a just as a counter, in certain situations, scripts are necessary to follow protocols to try to maximize a certain outcome? Are you saying then that maybe those scripts need to be expanded upon or revised outside of the current system because they could be better utilized from the people who are using it if they had more input and were able to be adaptable?
You've just nailed the answer to the question that you're asking.
Okay.
Yes, uh, I taught standard work for decades as part of bringing lean enterprise work into the healthcare environment. My first book, On the Mend, 12 years ago, was all about that. Yes, standardization has a value. It can make things more efficient. It can make things more productive. It can make things higher level quality, if you will, because now we can measure it because it's been standardized. All of that is golden. What happens though is in the real world, professionals have to still have the autonomy to modify the script, modify the standard work, modify the protocols in the event something occurs that's outside of the ordinary. And in a society in which you can easily be disciplined or challenged for not following the standard expectations, you introduce the idea of anxiety and fear into the work of the professional. That's a problem. That is a real problem. Now, obviously, things are always going to go wrong in our society, in the human condition. But I think we have over constrained our professionals in many many ways, and then we've overburdened them in the process. I was talking with a teacher recently in a high school where she is not only expected to teach certain things in the curriculum she's responsible for, but she's also constrained to teach only those things in a way that is confined to the standards of that teaching process. In addition, she's being asked to be a disciplinarian. She's asked to collect the phones of the students that come into the classroom. She's being asked to um, uh, uh, she's being asked to be the CEO of the room instead of the teacher in the room, and a lot of this has affected her ability to teach what she's supposed to teach effectively. She's being asked to stay away from political tensions that are being encountered in society today, when in fact some of what her students are supposed to be learning is how to apply current political reality to the work they're there to learn. So, as a teacher, she's sitting there saying, I'm trained to do all this stuff and I'm being told I can't. That's not empowering if we're going to use that word. It's certainly a situation where she feels like she's trying to teach and she has all kinds of chains hanging on her that don't allow her to do that.
I love your description of chains, being chained and being held back. It's appropriate and it makes a ton of sense. So, Roger, what I'm fascinated about is I love to study leadership and learn leadership. I wasn't a very good one when I first got in business, and I struggled mightily. And I hired a coach, and I really started to dig in and learn about this. And my life changed, my business has changed. So the question I want to ask you is, are organizations specifically investing in building leaders, teaching leaders, developing leaders? I've often said, and maybe you would agree or disagree, is that the business only goes so far as the leaders go. And if the leaders are not growing and learning, then the business can or will become stagnant. So I'm interested on your perspective on that.
Number one, yes, many businesses are investing in growing their leaders. Not all are, and maybe not most are, but many are. Yes, that does make the difference in terms of whether or not your business can generate consistently over time outstanding performance. It takes a bit of training in our high testosterone society to learn that leadership is creating followership. Uh, it doesn't come natural to many of us. We have to learn it, and we learn it from our mistakes, or we learn it from good coaches. We learn it from good mentors over time who role model for us how to inspire people instead of command and control people. When I first got into this, way back in the early 70s, I went through a training program sponsored by the American Management Association. And in that training program in 1974, I was trained that management is planning, organizing, and controlling. That's what that's what was being taught in 1974. And that's what I ended up teaching for about 5 years before I had a few, let's say, learning experiences that taught me that I had to do a few other things in order to be an effective leader. Planning, organizing, and controlling are wonderful strategic planning words. But when it comes to describing who we admire as leaders, those words seldom come up. The words that do come up are honesty, integrity, caring, humble. Um, these are the words that people use when they describe the folks they would love to be led by.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Totally agree with that. It was the CEO of Whole Foods, Mackey, talked about heart-centered leadership, and I've learned that.
Yes,
And it's that old saying, people don't care what you know until they know that you care.
that's
It's kind
exactly
of the
right.
yeah. I mean, they want to know that they feel valued and that they matter and that they're not there to serve a purpose for you per se as it is, as they want to feel something bigger than themselves. They want to be connected to someone, to something, to a team, to an organization, that they show up each and every day, that they feel enthusiastic and excited to come and perform at work, knowing that they're going to be rewarded and acknowledged and encouraged, supported. All those important tasks, or I should say, attributes necessary to build a great culture that's going to be the foundation and the bedrock of a successful business. Roger, one of the things that I was so excited to talk to you about, because as I mentioned, I just opened my 19th business over the last 30 something years, is you was your take on incentives. And so as we were talking in pre-show prep, I mentioned to you that I always learned the carrot and stick approach. Apparently, that may not be the way. So I'm interested, right? I'm interested. Why do companies use incentives? I mean, I kind of have my ideas, but I want to hear from you. And then why do you feel that incentives don't work? And why do they go wrong?
Well, a couple of pieces to this. The first piece is we think incentives are motivating. And now we get into this crazy world of psychology where we try to figure out, well, what motivates people. And then we make an assumption that as leaders, it's job to motivate. Well, I got news for you. It's not my job as a leader to motivate anybody. I come to my work motivated already. That happened inside of me. That's not because of what somebody else did to me. So we've already right out of the gate when we're talking about incentives, we're making the assumption that it is somehow management's job to motivate staff. The second thing we know is there's a difference between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic means it's coming from within. Extrinsic means it's an external that's motivating us to do something. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's a reward, maybe it's a new car, or a trip to India, or whatever it is. It's something extrinsic to us that would cause us to behave in ways we wouldn't otherwise behave. The problem with incentives is that when we start using incentives to change behavior, we're teaching people that in order to change behavior, there ought to be incentives. And so we're moving motivation from the intrinsic, people doing the work because they want to extrinsic, people doing the work because there's something in it for them later on, an extrinsic reward. That nullifies any work that you're doing to hire already engaged people, to cultivate an engaged workforce over time, and to cause a culture in your organization that is already enriching. So when you're using incentives, you're changing the game. And it's not just changing the game for the business, it's changing the game for the relationship between people who are doing the daily work and the management of that organization. It's nuanced, but it's real. I don't believe that the incentives don't work. I just don't think they're great for a long-term engagement of a workforce. You can get short-term results from incentives every day of the week. The problem, let's use an example. Let's say we create a sign-on bonus for new employees. Well, the first thing you've done now is you've created a process where, sir, I'll give you a $10,000 sign-on bonus if you promise to hire on and stay with me for a year. You get the bonus at the end of the year. Way cool. I'll take that job. The problem is, what about those 15 people who are doing that job already today? You never gave them a bonus. So not only have you moved incentives to the extrinsic, but you probably also pissed off 15 other people who are already doing the work. Why are they doing the work? And that's a problem. So you've used an incentive program to create a result and it worked, but you've got consequences to that you now have to deal with, and it can get very expensive. It can get very demoralizing.
So you
So
can you can de-incentivize as well.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, and money is a really tricky thing to use as an incentive. I use that in the example, but those aren't the only kind of incentives that exist out there. I would rather see programs where you bring people together and say, look, if the organization does well, we're all going to do well. And maybe it's a profit sharing or a gain sharing plan of some form where we're all going to share equally in the rewards of outstanding work. But again, those are complicated programs to set up, but they do work, and they create an esprit de corps in a culture of people working together and helping one another if they're well done. But to me, that's the closest I come to saying that's the kind of incentive I'd like to pay attention to.
Sure. So then, would it be fair or accurate to say then rewarding performance based on predetermined metrics that are hit is perhaps maybe a more effective So it's specific to certain KPIs or outcomes that you're looking to achieve. You know, the reason I bring that up is, and as a small business entrepreneur, when you do employee reviews, it's automatically assumed when you do a review, you get a raise, right? There's some sort of relationship
Yep.
there between the two. How that ever happened, I don't really know. And many years we went back to, or we changed that to where. So I probably asked my own question. I probably brought that on, but then we made it. It's performance based.
Yeah.
It's based on hitting certain specific metrics. What are your thoughts on that?
I love the question, Jay. I'm old enough to remember back in the mid '80s this whole drive for pay for performance. I don't know if you've heard it
Sure,
said in those
sure.
words or not. Pay for performance was all about that, and we would set up KPIs, and we would then create a metric system, and you either uh, exceeded performance, met performance requirements, or failed to meet performance requirements, and your end of year hit would depend on what the ratings of your boss was. I, I was never happy with that, even though I designed a couple of those systems back then, and so I went on the hunt. And I sent out a missive to 50 HR people on the East Coast and 50 HR people on the West Coast, and I conducted 2 focus groups. And I basically said, we're going to come together and we're going to figure out who has the best pay for performance system, and we're going to design one among ourselves that we all love and will take back to our organizations. You know what? Literally everybody came to the program hoping somebody else had one. Nobody liked their pay for performance system. And what was interesting to me as we tried to sort that out is not only were they not working, but they were working against our intentions. And here's what I mean. You go to a manager and you say, okay, we got a pot of money. You have 8% of your budget to award this next year to the performers in your division. So figure out which 8% are going to get the top award, which 35% are going to get the good boy award, which 30% are going to get the, you know what, you could be doing better level of award, and which 5 or 10% aren't going to get anything because they didn't do the job. Well, that put the managers in a situation where they had to make some pretty hard decisions, and many of them decided, I ain't going there. I'm not going to make those decisions. I'm going to get everybody the same thing. And it never worked. It just never worked. When you try to use incentives this way to change performance, what you're basically saying to the people doing the daily work, I don't trust that you want to do the job in the first place the way it needs to be done. Whatever happened to the idea of inspiring people to do good work because it's work worth doing? It's work that needs to be done for the organization, for the community we're here to serve, for the customers we're here to serve, and what you have isn't just a job. You have an ability to do something that brings value to somebody else. Uh, we don't have enough leaders who are thinking in those terms, and all this idea of incentivizing people is actually, if you stop and think about it, it's kind of an insult to those people. Why do they have to be incentivized to do what they should be doing anyway? That's
Sure.
an insult.
I think some would argue is that the workforce is very different than, currently than it was 10 years, 20 years ago. And I would probably each subsequent generation would argue the same thing. And I certainly don't want to paint a broad brush stroke here, but some people, work because they have to, not because they want to. And so therefore they're just putting their time in, collecting a paycheck so they can live their life. And then there's those who are there because it's something that means something to them, that matters to them, and they have the inherent values system that doing good work means something. It makes them feel good. Serving other people makes them feel good. So I'm not really sure the question I'm asking, other than the fact is that the differentiation between the two is as big to this equation, knowing who you are hiring, who's on your team, who deserves to stay on the team, and who deserves to get lunch to go.
Oh yeah, you're describing actually the real world as most organizations experience it, and I get it. Leaders can make choices, and when we hire, we typically try to hire people who come in with that first attitude, the attitude of I really want to do good work, and I really want to serve, and I really want to be helpful, and I want to do some things that matter most. That's what we try to hire. Later on, we learn that not everybody goes there or stays there. This becomes a leadership issue in the sense that now it's your job as a leader to say, okay, this person they didn't maintain that energy. Now they're cynics. Now they're apathetics. Now they're naysayers. Now they're not living to work. They're working to live. They're doing something very different than what I anticipated when I hired them. I can have an honest communication with them and ask them to go back to where they were. B, I can discipline them, but it's probably going to entrench the issue further. C, I can replace them with somebody who comes in with more energy. The idea here is to create a culture where, number one, there is an expectation of high energy for the goals of the organization and for the purposes you're there to serve. And number two, a culture in which people feel supported in that enterprise. That's not easy, but it can be done. And I keep telling people if you want to create that kind of culture, there are 5 things you can do, and if you do these 5 things, it's going to happen over time. But you have to do these 5 things. And I have had leaders take me up on it. I've had other leaders who haven't. Those who take me up on it, they do these 5 things. The culture starts to change over time. You want to know what they are? I'll
Of
tell you
course.
what those 5 things are. The first thing is you have to be in an environment where you're willing to listen to the people who are there to serve the needs of the organization. As a leader, make this promise. I will listen to you and I will take what you have to tell me seriously. That's the first promise. If you make that promise and you keep that promise, people will tell you what's going on. Second, I will keep any promises I make to you. Too often, leaders break promises to their staff. They say, if you do this, we're going to do this, and this for you. And then when push comes to shove, well, we didn't have the money in the budget, we don't have the time, we have other priorities, and the promises get broken. The second promise is, I will keep my promises that I make to you. The third promise, I will treat you respectfully at all times. This is really big. One of the things in my second book, Lead with Purpose, I focus 2 chapters on how professionals are being bullied today. It can't continue. When you bully somebody, they have 2 choices. They either bully back or they withdraw. If they withdraw, you're done. There's no more relationship. If they bully back, they're probably done too. Bullying doesn't work. You can't force professionals who are highly trained and highly self motivated to conform to your requirements and your wants and needs when you bully them. It's just not respectful. You will lose your best because they will go somewhere else. Fourth promise, I will compensate you fairly and competitively. If you compensate professionals fairly and competitively, they won't need incentives to do the right thing. We make big mistakes in the area of compensation. The mistakes we make are we base our compensation on data that's 9 months old or 12 months old, and the marketplace has already shifted. And so we claim to be paying people competitively, and when they go talk to their colleagues in other organizations, they find out that they're making more than they are. We have to treat people competitively, and that means getting above the 50% comp ratio. I had a philosophy when I was in the HR role of keeping people at the 60% comp ratio. I wanted to make sure that the professionals that were working for me, when they went out and did their homework with their colleagues in other organizations, found out that they were making a little bit more than their colleagues were. I wanted that. To a lot of executives, that feels like wasted money. It's not. Not if you want to cultivate a long-term loyalty in your organization. The fifth promise, I will have your back when things go south. Things are going to go south. Things Businesses go up and they go down. Businesses have feast and famine aspects to it. You've been an entrepreneur. You know this in your own businesses. Not every day is a successful day. Too often, we treat employees like they're expendable. We call them our greatest asset, and then we lay them off when we don't need them. You don't lay off assets. Uh, that's crazy. That's not sane psychology. If employees are an asset, you figure out some other way to use that asset to sustain the business and grow the business. We treat them like they're costs, not assets. If you make these five promises, I will listen. I will keep my promises. I will treat you respectfully. I will compensate you fairly, and I'll have your back. People will create a relationship with you and will work their tail out for you. That'll create a new culture.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was gold right there. Roger, that was fantastic. I 100% agree with you. As I'm listening to you list off these, each and every one of these are near and dear to my heart because you're only as good as your word. And if people don't believe you are who you say you are or who you proclaim yourself to be, if you're not authentic, if you're not there to serve them, right? And if they know that, your word means nothing, and if they're not going to be fairly compensated for the work that they do, and most importantly, I agree with this, right? Because in business, there's reasons and seasons, and there's seasons sometimes when it's really, really dry, and you're wondering, are we going to make it? And those people who've been with you from the start, who invested their energy and their heart and their love, man, they're family to me, and I would do anything for them. And so obviously you're talking more on the big business side, but it's not any different than on small business as well too. And I would even argue maybe even more so because it's more of an intimate relationship.
I think you're exactly right. And one of the things that we get ourselves all tangled up sometimes in, I referred to it earlier, the testosterone side of leadership, and it doesn't work. It just isn't helpful. We're all capable of it,
Sure.
but it over time we pay a big price for that. I think we have to understand that leadership is about community building, and if you want to build a community, you have to follow certain rules and certain principles, and it's not about command and control. It's about help, and it's about being willing to listen and learn. That's what it's about.
I've often thought I should write a book, The Tyrannical Leader, because that's who I was when I first started. Everything you could do to screw up and not be successful, the subtitle.
Yeah, we all have that book in our history.
Right?
Yeah, we do.
Roger, this has been a lot of fun, a lot of great information. I think people need to go out and get your book or any of your books. So where can they find them? And what are you doing now, by the way?
Most of my work today is executive coaching and one-on-ones, and I do some senior executive team work. I like to work with small executive groups. I do a little bit of keynoting because of the books. My books are available through Amazon, but you can go to my link at my website at rogergerard.com. And you'll see linkages to my books. You'll see my podcasts or all the other podcasts that I've done, and this one will end up on that link. You'll see my blogs that I post on LinkedIn once a week. So I'm spending a lot more time writing than I am consulting right now, and that's okay. It's a good place to be today.
That's great. Well, you've been in the game a long, long time. You've earned to do what you want at this point.
Well, my wife wonders what the retirement party was 5-10 years ago, but that's okay.
Retirement's retirement. I don't know, man. To me, it's an antiquated concept and model. I want to give value to the day I die. I want to live with passion every single day. People get this concept, the golden handcuffs, you work 40, 45 years, and then you go off in the sunset. And we all know the statistics, particularly with guys who do that. Man, you got to have a purpose to get up each morning, to live with passion, to be able to serve. We're put on this earth for such a short period of time. The best thing we can do is give value and add value to other people's lives.
Absolutely. I've replaced the word retirement with repurposing.
I love it. I love
So,
it. I may
yep,
steal that from you.
there you go. Go for it.
All right, one last question.
Sure.
So where is it going? Where's this trend in business and leadership, and what do you see as the next iteration of what we're talking about here?
The next iteration, I hope, and it's a hope because you can't predict these kinds of things, but I hope we find a way to engage the folks in their late 20s, early 30s, when there's a growing maturity in that population, to more of a community-based approach to getting work done. My vision is a world where this idea of trying to motivate people is not necessary. I think work is a necessary source of meaning and value for for human beings. I think it's common to most of us, with some exceptions, yes. But I think as human beings, work is a very important endeavor, and instead of treating people like commodities, we need to treat people like assets. Commodities are easy. Steel is a commodity. You can put a brand on it if you want, but it doesn't matter. It's still steel. When we start treating people that way, like we can plug and play them, it doesn't work very well. I had my annual physical with a new physician because my last physician retired, and this new guy, I brought in a piece of paper in lean language. It's called an A3, and I laid out the purpose of my health endeavors, my current state with the metrics, my target state with the metrics, my plan for improving my health, and a place for him to put his advice. And I basically told him, I'm in charge of my health care. You're not. So how are you going to help me? And he just sat there and he said, I thought you were here for a physical. I said, no, that'll happen. But first we have to have a relationship, and I want to know what you're going to do to help me. And we had a great conversation. He's a young guy, and he said, most of my patients don't come in willing with this kind of preparation. I said, I don't know any other way, and it's not about sick care for me. It's about health care for me. At the age of 75, I absolutely want health care, and so we had a great conversation. I think we need to cause people to understand who they are, what they intend in their life, what they want for themselves, so that they have the courage and the ability to ask for it. And I don't think we've done that in society. I'm just using that as one small example. But I can take that into any other venue of my life as well, not just the healthcare part of my life.
You should patent that A3, and that should be the new standard in the new paradigm of healthcare, not sickness care, which is what our system is designed for. It was funny because you were telling a story previously, about being stuck in these processes and boxes, and that particularly in healthcare, if they don't follow these processes, they can be reprimanded or sued. Give you a perfect example. I went and had a physical done about a year or so ago. I'm 50. I was at that point, I was 59, and I hadn't been for 5 years. I don't take any drugs, no lifestyle drugs. I'm the outlier. And so when I went in, they do all their testing and stuff, and they're going through, you're not on any blood pressure medication. I said, no. You're not on any statin drugs. I said, no. And literally the nurse she said to me, she goes, we don't see many people like you. And I said, why why am I an outlier? I'm no special. God didn't touch me in any special way than he touches you or someone else. I have the same physiology as you do. It's just what I put in my body to express health may be different. The choices I make, the habits I engage in are
Correct.
different. So when this conversation expanded, because I've been in healthcare for 30 something years, and I said, how often do you sit here, are you able to have conversations about lifestyle? And if someone comes in and they have high blood pressure, do you give them recommendations from lifestyle first and then have them come back and retest them in a month or so? We can't do that. We have to put them on hypertensive medication. And I said, that's the problem with our system.
Bingo.
And by the way, they all know. They all know. Even if they wanted to engage at that level, they're incapable. Because the way that they're scheduled, they're required to see a certain volume of people per day. And so instead of a 35-minute conversation, it's 10 to 15 minutes and they're out. They have to go on to the next patient. So
if you're getting 15, you're getting a lot.
Yeah, 15's a lot. Exactly. So to engage in a level of conversation that you was remarkable. And it's part of the reason why I just opened my 19th business, which is called Revitalizing Health and Hormones. It's about the relationship between the provider and the patient, however long that conversation and that dialogue needs to go to really understand the basic needs, wants, and desires of the individual, and then putting a strategic plan to help them accomplish that from a very comprehensive perspective. So basic on how they eat, move, and think, and it's been remarkable in a sense that I knew there was a demand, but not to the level that the demand has been. People are ready for something new. They know the system is broke.
They actually do. And what you just described in your story is what we were talking about earlier. The standardization of healthcare is a great example of what goes wrong when a physician who knows better or a nurse who knows better has to practice a certain way because that's what the organization requires in order to boost profits or in order to make sure that they offer their services in a way that reduces risk. If you don't need the drugs, you shouldn't have them.
Correct.
So I get it. I absolutely understand what you're describing, and it's consistent with what we're talking about in Lead with Purpose. We're marginalizing those professionals. So
for sure. And that was a great full circle on our conversation today. Roger, this has been a real pleasure, really fun, very engaging, very eye-opening for me and learning. I'm sure it has been for my audience as well.
All right, Jay, I appreciate the time you took with me, and I wish you well. I can't wait to see the results of this conversation. Thank you.
We will share with you for sure once we're ready to lease it. So Triple P Nation, a lot of great content Roger delivered today, particularly if you're an entrepreneur. I would go back and take some notes. Certainly the 5 steps he talked about, how to transform a culture. Culture is so key to the success of any organization, not just a business. And so there were so many nuggets. I would go back, take some notes, and really kind of contemplate, maybe meditate a little bit on those and how you can implement them in your organization to basically to lead better and to provide more value and a better experience for your customers and the people that you serve. So as I always say, Triple P Nation, you be you, just be the best you. And I promise you will always empower your dreams, ignite your passion, and accelerate prosperity. Until next week, guys, be well.